All right, to Virginia Republican Congressman Bob Goodlatte, who insists that the House is still on track to derail this spending locomotive. Congressman, very good to have you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Good to be with you, Neil.
What happens now? You know, everything is appearances. You know, Congressman, we've chatted about this before. The appearance and the impression early on was that you Republicans were going to come in and gangbusters and start cutting billions per hour when you got in. Now, that's always the hype and the hyperbole, but nevertheless, talk now that much of the cutting is going to center around, you know, your congressional staffs and the like, commendable, and some of this other more substantial stuff is going to be some months down the road, disappointing to some. What do you say?
Well, you know, quite frankly, it is disappointing that we can't do more immediately, but the big cuts have to come with agreement with the Senate and with the President. So we'll start that process. We're going to have a recommendation that we go back to 2008 levels when the continuing resolution, what keeps the government operating, comes up in February. That'll be our first big test. But we felt that in order to make the case that we could cut the executive branch, which is 1,000 times larger, spends 1,000 times more money than the legislative branch, we had to start by cutting ourselves. So this is a small beginning, but it is a beginning, and I think we can cut more here in the legislative branch. But what really needs to happen is to cut back on the continuing resolution. As Paul Ryan said, we're spending at 2010 levels, which are very high. We want to start by going back to 2008 levels. We'll see that test out in February.
All right, but are you guys on board? It seemed like Chairman Ryan was saying this to me last night, Congressman, that you'd be okay with a commitment, a firm commitment, obviously not just a pinky promise, to cut and curtail spending in future months and then consider raising the debt limit. In other words, you don't have to cut all the spending before you do that debt limit move.
Well, I think that's going to vary from member to member. Personally, I want to see some very strong evidence that we can show the American people.
What strong evidence, Congressman? Tell me strong evidence.
Well, I want to see exactly what is put on the table between our leadership and the White House, but I would not want to say we're going to vote to raise the debt limit on a future hope that we're going to have spending cuts, because the American people expect more of that. This is a critical juncture. When we get to having to raise that debt limit, that'll come a little later, probably in March. And when we do, we ought to be making sure we're getting some really tangible cuts that we can show the public in order to make sure that the government doesn't default on its borrowing obligations, which is what we have to address with the debt limit increase.
All right, Congressman, thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil.
All right, slightly different point of view on this. You hike